Welcome to All About Impact, the official podcast of Imagine If Insights and Strategy. I'm your host, Susan Petoyan. All About Impact is the only podcast in the world that is exclusively dedicated to the art and science of creating real and positive impact with data, research, and insights. We push ambitious marketers, practitioners, and users of data, research, and insights to create meaningful, tangible, real-world impact with their work. Join us as we bring you diverse perspectives from hand-picked impact champions, incredible cross-disciplinary leaders who are masters at activating insights to transform business and achieve unparalleled success for their teams, organizations, careers, and of course, customers. Now is the time to venture into the world of influence and impact far beyond data and insights. Tune in today and boldly unleash the impact champion in you. In this episode of All About Impact, my guest is Naveena Samuel, Vice President of Creative Strategy and Research at Sony Pictures Entertainment. I'm absolutely thrilled to talk about impact with Naveena, as she is the total package when it comes to a research leader who gets strategy and innovation. You see, she brings deep research expertise from both brand and agency sides, courage to tackle the most challenging business problems, and empathy needed to build real trust with some of the most complex stakeholder circles in the film and entertainment industry. And in creative industries like the movie business, researchers face unique challenges in driving research impact. How do you balance data-driven insights with someone's subjective intuition? How do you tell the research story in under 5 minutes when you're one of many teams supporting a big release? Impact in this business is especially hard, but not impossible. It takes wisdom, courage, trust, and sometimes a little political savvy. So tune in and take notes. Hello. Welcome to another episode of All About Impact, Imagine If's podcast dedicated fully to creating impact with good strategic research. And I am absolutely honored and super stoked to have a really good friend of mine and the ultimate market researcher and strategist in the film industry, in the entertainment industry, Naveena Samuel. Welcome, Naveena.
Thank you for having me, Susan.
Naveena is an executive in the film and entertainment industry. Naturally, she's a very strategic, innovative, driven professional. She thrives on tackling challenges and solving some of the most complex problems in this industry. Personally, I say this with full confidence. Naveena is one of those leaders who creates an environment for trust and courage for people around her. Having worked with her in the past, I know that personally, and I am really excited to dive right in. Thank you again for agreeing to come and talk about something that most people don't talk about in our industry or talk about maybe as an afterthought. But before we do that, I think it would be great for our audience to hear directly from you a little bit about your career kind of trajectory, the background. You have a lot of great experience in lots of different brands. Maybe tell us a little bit some of the highlights, maybe why you started in this, why you went into the consumer insights and research space, just to start us off.
Yeah, this is always interesting when I tell people this, but I'm one of those few people who has a master's in marketing research. And there's only like a handful of universities who offer that, because usually marketing research is part of the marketing or a business degree. And I just had a small internship when I was back in India for an ad agency. And just to get me off their hands and out of their hair, they told me to go do a survey of students for a computer institute that they were making a campaign for. And I thought it was really fascinating. And I had a background in statistics. So bringing those two things in together was really fun. And so when I saw this program being offered, I just jumped into it. And I love the marketing research program. I went to UT in Arlington, and it's a very hands-on, practical program. And from there, they have a really great board. I ended up in a firm in Boston and then moving to LA. But I have both agency side and client side experience.
That's also somewhat unique still in the industry, yeah?
Yeah, so my entertainment career started when I joined MarketCast, which is one of the two big companies that, the studios use. And, I moved to LA. I was working on cars and credit cards and furniture brand, like all these things that, was so removed from the industry, so to speak. But when you're in LA, you can't stay away too far from it. And once I got in, it was just so fascinating and relatable. I just kept staying. I ended up at Disney where I met you. And then currently I'm at Sony Pictures. And it's been a really great ride because I've been able to change roles. I started off in international research for marketing. Then when we went global, I started leading the production research side of things, which is so fascinating. Working with the filmmakers, the creatives, these are the guys who create the magic, and being able to have some sort of impact well before the movie is released is just so much fun.
And powerful.
So it's been really great. And, like my background and where I thrive is long-term research. A lot of this is short-term, and it's like movie by movie by movie. But the more I work with people, we started doing more, kind of green light, early studies. And this is not anything new. I did that when I was at MarketCast, on the agency side, but being able to see where it actually goes and how it's actually being used is something that's new right now for me. So that's where I am, and it's been like a long trajectory, but ultimately I find myself in a really good spot.
I love this story. You're absolutely right. A lot of people kind of stumble into research, but seems like you were a lot more intentional. You've put the time into schooling, into the academic kind of lens, through the academic lens, but also have done both kind of sides of the divide, if you will. So kind of like the ultimate researcher here for the entertainment industry. Again, I'm so excited to hear your perspective on some of the issues that personally I have chosen, as we were talking about this earlier, I've chosen to focus on this year. And that is on like making a difference with research, right? Naveena, making sure that whether it's a shorter term or longer term research, whatever the initiative is, that the company or the teams using actually change, actually kind of get the most value, actually make the decisions, etc. So let's dive into that as the first question. Naveena, often when we think about impact and ROI for research projects, consumer insights research projects, usually it's like, okay, is it accurate? Is it on time? Is it on budget? Did it answer all our kind of questions, etc.? And it feels like that's kind of most of the length, that conversation goes. But is that sufficient? Do you feel like we should sometimes embrace kind of a more a different definition of impact, maybe? Tell us kind of from your view, based on your years of experience, real world, business experience, as well as research, like academic, research experience, Naveena. Tell us how you think we should think about impact. Like, what is one element of a definition of this notion of impact that you feel like is important for us to talk about, especially within a brand or on a corporate side?
Yeah. So, having been on both sides of the story, so to speak, my definition has shifted. When you reached out to me and said, "Oh, we're going to talk about impact," I kind of did a little bit of homework, right? So I looked up the definition online, and it said a market difference or change. And I think that to me got me thinking, because we tend to look at the very tactical reactions, right? So for example, we offered a promotion. What is the impact of that promotion? And we can measure that. Yep. We can tell you how many people saw it. We can tell you how many people responded to it. And that's the extent of a lot of our touch point research, right? But in the end, I think we get stuck in staying in that spot without realizing that we have to start looking above, right? So it's almost like a reverse funnel. So not just looking at the touch points and what we're measuring on a very small project level, but ultimately, how is that having an impact on the bigger company and what the goals are? I'm going to talk about kind of an anecdote. My first job out of my internship out of college was with Chadwick Martin Bailey. It's a small boutique for very, very smart people.
Yep.
And
Smart people, yeah.
the John Martin was, took on our team for a bit. And he always had us do this exercise where you create a table where it says business goal, business question, and then survey question. So every survey question had to tie to a business question, which ultimately had to tie to the business goal. Now, the difference between a business goal and a business question is so minute if you don't really think about the big thing, right? So is it bottom line financial? Are you trying, it's so different than saying, I want to increase sales. That's a tactic to get to the larger business goal. So I think that really served me well because it was really good training ground. And one of the things that will serve us well in understanding impact is if we always keep our eye on what the business goal is. And for us in entertainment, it's either butts and seats or eyeballs. But at the same time, what impact does it have on revenue, right? And so it means that there might be some decisions that don't make sense to maybe a creative person or a marketing person or someone in publicity, but you have to make that decision because the ultimate goal is the bottom line. So I think as long as we keep our eye on the prize, our definition of impact will change from just being, is it accurate? Is it on time? Is it under budget? Because those things are, like you said, cost of entry, right? We need to have those. Yep. Everything has to be done right. And it's your integrity and your work ethic and how you accomplish it has to be the baseline. It's that bigger picture thinking that will change how research is being seen.
So you have so much good insight that you packed in that response, Naveena. It's very juicy, and I don't know where to kind of go because there's so much we can cover. But maybe the next follow-up to that kind of really solid, definite, or broader kind of way of thinking about impact is, why is it so hard to do what you were saying? Why is it so hard to think about kind of the highest level business goals? Why is it sometimes not even thought about? It feels like if we do think about it, often it's after we've done the work, after we've brought in the insights, after we've kind of shared and socialized, that's perhaps when we start to say, okay, well, how does this help us with the goals that we had? And often, not all the time, but sometimes, enough times, there is a missed opportunity there, right? What do you think makes it so hard to think about impact at the right time or, along the way, for example?
Yes, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is the timing of when the research is being done. Mm-hmm. If there's a process in place and the research is brought in the middle saying, we have some questions to be answered, so why don't we ask those questions? Then it becomes a very short-term, stopgap solution. So we get the answer and they get the answer they need and then they move on. But there's really nothing that drives change over there, right? So that to me is a big part of it because, and we've seen this in different companies, that we worked with, that it depends so much on where research sits and at the table. If we are sitting with the decision makers and we are helping them make the decision, we're bringing our expertise and our reasoning to why we're suggesting something, and then they decide that it's something they can live with or they need. It makes a huge difference. But if we are sitting well below that, and it's harder for research to start to speak truth to power. And I think, or any organization that empowers research to speak truth to power will ultimately benefit from having these insights that will actually move the needle. For us, it's harder to pinpoint a particular process, but I'll go way back in my career. One of our clients, such a fun client, was Blue Bunny Ice Cream. And, it happens a lot with mid-sized firms. When you're doing research, you're actually doing it with the decision makers. And I think it was at that point, we were helping them identify trends, and so the impact of our research, I was able to hold it in a safe way, right? Because we figure out we help them understand where they should go next. But I think when we come in as research, I'll give you the projects that absolutely drive me insane are the tracking projects. Because at some point, somebody thought this is a good idea. It helped them. It was a strategic decision. 5 years down the line, nobody cares. It becomes like TPS. Right?
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe you have to be old to understand my reference. But it's like it becomes a thing. It's the intern who comes in, who takes on sending the weekly reports. It goes into somebody's inbox.
Yeah.
They're sick and tired of seeing this for 5 years, and at the end of it, it doesn't matter what people are saying or complaining about. That to me is the biggest thing. Like, how do we get in early on the process and change the thinking around us not just being like a side utility service, when we're actually hand in hand with strategy and building and creating that, and working together. I think that is a change I think we should be able to see.
I love this, Naveena. Side utility function, SUF. It's a new acronym I'm going to use. And extra kudos to you for talking about tracking in that particular light. I completely philosophically share your views on that tool, that methodology as a decision-making tool. But I want to go back on go a little bit deeper on the point about the geography of where the team is, like the altitude, right? Are they, at the right level? Do they have access to the right level of decision-making? And that tends to be one of the first things intuitively that a lot of people think when they say, well, why didn't this make a change? Why didn't this result in something more significant in terms of results and impact? Well, because I'm not talking to the right people or the decision makers, etc. But is this a cop-out, Naveena, that we researchers sometimes point to? Is the accountability on us or on more broadly on the culture? Is there enough respect for data-driven thinking or for the voice of the consumer for the research team to not be put at the right, altitude or the right geography within the company?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I'm going to maybe say something that might not go well with the research teams, but we're just one stream of information, right? So I think from my experience on the client side, it's that the problem that comes to mind is if you want to go far, go alone. But if you want to go further, go with others. I'm pretty sure I'm butchering that. But, I realized that early on in my career, and especially on the agency side, I just want things done because I want this project done. I don't want them to ask me any questions. I'll give you maybe a week to fix things and then I'm done. I'm going to move on to the next one. Yeah. And it's not even about the assembly line, even for custom work, right? So because you have limited resources and you have limited access to time and money and you want to make sure you're doing the best job possible. But when it comes to actually making a decision, this is just one data point and it has to sit within a bunch of different things. And speaking truth to power is hard. It is really hard, but it and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I remember presenting something to pretty senior folk and it made a difference. They made a change in the movie, right? There's another time when I remember talking to one of the super, super senior famous people and had to tell him that his idea is not going to work. And I could see him getting very frustrated. And what did the company do? They spent the next 2 years investing in that idea and building it and putting marketing and everything behind that idea that we said wouldn't work, right? But I don't know if that was a home entertainment play. Was it a consumer product play? Was it something else that justified the investment? And my research was just one point, right? Because I was coming from the outside. I didn't have enough visibility into the inner workings of the company.
Right.
So with that being said, I do think that it is our responsibility to make sure that we present things in a way that is easy to understand. And that too is a huge part of our role is having that elevator pitch is so important because we are one data point in a meeting with like 20 people around the table, you get 30 seconds to tell people what your 6-week project it means, right?
Yeah.
So how do you, effective communication and how we say it, it's like we can be research speak and smart all day long, but unless you're able to break it down for someone to understand in like less than 5 minutes, I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Very powerful insights and jewels of knowledge there, Naveena. So I think the communication piece, we often hear a lot about this, like tell better stories or tell a story, etc. And collectively, perhaps the industry, on both sides, right, aspires to that. But the time pressure is real when you have very stressed out and, stress meaning like stretched, right? Lots of different kind of decisions at the on the agenda for the executive teams, etc. You cannot really tell a lot of story in a very short period of time. So finding that right balance for the right team of executives or the right kind of audience, etc., is definitely a nuance here of how to cross storytelling and effective communication, right? And if they don't get it, if they don't understand it, like the insights don't even have a chance to change hearts and minds, for example.
It's so important. I have seen entire meetings derail because someone said the wrong thing, right? You start with the wrong thing and the entire meeting is derailed, which means months of work is down the drain because you only get that one chance. And I know the pressure is real, but in a way, I think I thrive under pressure. It's a problem, I know. I'm working on it. But it's one of those things where it's just all boils down to telling the truth. And a lot of research by the pound that we used to joke about is trying to be very kind and go around and round, trying not to talk about the real issue because it's like you're afraid how it's going to be received, right? So if there's a neutrality to what you're saying, then it's easier to get straight to the heart of the issue. But, there's unfortunately a culture of, this is not your place, or I shouldn't be saying this, or how do people feel, that holds people back. Holds me back. You
just proved the point that I said in my introduction that, courage is a defining aspect of kind of what you bring to a team. Because it does take that courage, both politically, but also from an intellectual, almost moral perspective of having to tell the truth. There's a fiscal component to that too, as you said in your example there, right? If you're not really able to share the right truth at the right time or, penetrate with the right truth at the right time, like get to the audience, there could be, months of years of investment that can go in the wrong direction. On this topic of truth and being the stewards of research, of the consumer truth or the truth in the marketplace, as part of many data points, what are the kind of the internal barriers that a research or insight leader has to overcome to, what do I do to become more courageous is what I'm trying to say. How can I more confidently insert myself in places where I'm not supposed to be? How can I more confidently challenge a perspective? Doing it well, of course, but challenge a perspective where, might be above my pay grade or, next to someone very famous, especially in this industry, right? Where you're dealing with tremendously talented people who have very strong opinions. What are the components of that courage that you're talking about?
I mean, honestly, for me, it's just all about trust. And it's because you can go up to somebody and say they're wrong. And if they don't trust you, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. And it's still a work in progress for me. It's still working. I have some people, who will pick up the phone and call me for help, but others, I have to still work at it. And that's just the nature of our jobs, right? But I think the trust aspect is very, very important because if people don't trust your instinct and they don't trust your integrity,
Yeah.
and they don't trust that you want to help them, then whatever you say, it could be the snazziest presentation, it could be the slickest deck,
Yeah.
it won't go anywhere, And a lot of times the biggest change comes from a quick memo or an email, right? Because it's someone's emailing you from a meeting they're making a big decision, say, what is this thing? And you respond and they make a decision immediately.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be so much the presentation. It's about trust and understanding who your audience is too, right? Because when we design presentations, we always are like, okay, well, this person loves data, so let's put more numbers on the screen. This person will literally walk out. So can we just tell everything in the first slide? Because we don't know if we're going to have them for more than 10 minutes, right? So it just depends on understanding that. And I think, the first few years of my career, I moved, I was, 4 or 5 years, couple years here, and just trying to, I followed great people. So I don't regret any of my choices. But the longevity I've had at Sony has helped me understand personalities, understand people, and also build that relationship of trust, right? And on the supplier side, it becomes that much more important, because do they trust you when you suggest something, that you're doing it for the benefit of their company, or are you doing it for the benefit of your company? So is it research for the sake of research, or is it research because you overheard them say something and you said, hey, by the way, I heard this. Here's what I suggest. It could help you make a decision. And then you get invited to the table.
I love this. I'm going to make a quick list, kind of like a mental list, so the audience tracks, Naveena. So we talked about, being properly positioned within the organization with respect to marketing or, all the other stakeholders, right? And part of that is not just kind of where are you sitting, but what level are you able to access conversations, right? Are you, do you have a seat at the decision-making table? So that's one of the key drivers of setting yourself up for good impact, potentially. The second one is this notion of fostering kind of courage, right? Kind of doing the behavioral work of learning how to communicate with the audience, how to deliver, right? Corollary to that is how you present and how you tell the stories, knowing your audience, etc. But I love the trust one, because it's so complex and requires so much more from your typical researcher. We have trust issues with the data. We want it to be highest quality. We want it to be the very best. But the skill set, the mindset that's required to be in a place where you can even start building trusted relationships is often, relegated maybe to the head of the insights team or more senior level leaders. But it doesn't have to be, right? You can foster, trustful relationships with everybody that is at least customer or consumer or audience being, moviegoer in this case, focused. What have you done to build some of that trust that has allowed you in different contexts, in different situations, to have good influence, to have the chance to kind of help the rest of the teams make kind of the best decisions for the particular film or initiative, whatever the case is?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because it's making me think about what I do, which, self-awareness, right? But I would say that as a team, we tend to always have this posture of, how can I help? What can I do to help you? Because we are, like I said, being on the client side, you realize the little silo you're in, right? Because the decisions are like that long. They've been talking about something for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So you just come in almost at the very end of that process. And so for us, it's always been, how can we help? And then the other thing is, my team always has very open communication with people who are on our level and who are helping, right? So it's we always know if we can't reach an exec, we know who to call, who'll know where they are, right? So it's that level of respect for others and their work and what they bring to the table, and us saying, how can we help make your job easier? That I feel has helped us, because at the end of the day, for me personally, which maybe I should do a little bit of more of this, but it's not about me getting the glory, right? And if I don't present it, then I make sure my boss has the information so he can talk in the meeting that he needs to be in. So it's about, and one of a senior exec in my office, she told me at the beginning, she said, do what's right for the company and it'll always work out. And I took that pretty seriously, So it's about just asking that question over and over again. Like, what can I do to help? How can I make your job easier? I think at the end of the day, those are the only two things that matter.
Again, so much there, especially for someone who is growth oriented and open to kind of learning and in a more self-aware way, thinking about kind of how they operate, kind of how they come across, right? As a leader, as a messenger of the truth. But I do want to highlight the nuance there, Naveena, of you if you're not able to influence directly, first of all, you need to have the helpfulness gene, right? You have to be ready always to help and support. But if you're not able to directly kind of influence and directly convey, let's say, a contrarian point or whatever it is, right? Based on the truth or based on the research, you should collaborate, influence the influencer often, right? Like, because there is already existing deep relationships. Again, especially in this industry, you have to really think about kind of the lines of the dynamics of how decisions are made. And you don't always have to be in the middle or at the center. In fact, sometimes it's best if you're not, but you're feeding the right, the best insights that are packaged the right way to the right people to ultimately help the whole organization get to the right place. Sounds almost like a little bit of a chess game.
Yeah, it really is. And, it's like, I think for me, politics is politics, but at the end of the day, politics is about, do people like you and do they trust you, right? And then at the end, and you have to just be yourself and do what you need to do, because ultimately when there's an environment of trust, it's just so much easier.
Yeah.
It's easier on you mentally. It's easier on you, like, to get your job done. You're not spinning your wheels. You're not trying to figure things out. And you're always in a position of, if something goes wrong, you're in it together. And I think, and you're right, going back to what you said earlier, it's putting a lot of pressure on, like, the typical researcher, right? Because it's a lot of emotional intelligence along with the data. Like, there are some people on my team who can, like, will sit with reams of spreadsheets and love it. And I can do that, but it's not where I thrive. I like to look at things more strategically and look at the data and write the story. I'm really good at writing a story, but that's why I push my team to build relationships. Even if you never work with the intersectional team, go be friends with them, or, get a lunch somewhere, get to know the other parts of the business and what they do, because otherwise you're only going to be on the periphery.
Love this so much, Naveena. The fact that there are different types of, data people or research, insights people with different kind of predispositions or talents, etc. But there is a horizontal, like, through line there of, you should still be able to, with your work or your piece of the work, still be able to connect, at the very least, to have that transparency, the relevance, like, or basis, a little bit of basis for trust to start, right? Great. Naveena, so you said something that I love this, because again, we often shy away from talking about things the way they are. We talk around them. We, use euphemisms, let's say, or we kind of avoid the deflect. So the topic of politics, right? Which I love the way you're kind of describing that. For an insights group, especially, it's about, having the trust and the stability of, that long-term relationship with the stakeholder groups. But in some situations, perhaps in some industries, or when decisions are very expensive often, right? there are, or very complex. They don't have to, I mean, most complex decisions are expensive, but when there's a lot of variety of people around the table, right? Lots of different opinions, the politics can be very significant driver or barrier of the outcomes based on the research, right? I think we can honestly talk about this. Like, there is creatives or there's people who might say, this is my perspective. Can you go drum up some research that validates this?
Okay.
In the real world, this does happen. Or, we find something that, this team does not agree with this, but this other team is much more important, like finance, for example. Their view is going to be, trumping the other one, for example, right? So we often, as neutral people, as market messengers, we have to play this balancing act or figure out how to navigate it at the very least. But to go back to politics, what has been, other than, having the trust in the relationship, what has been a good formula for you to marry the to bring in the truth despite the politics or in spite of the politics? Like, how do you,
especially in your life, Susan, you can't ask me that question.
That's a hard question.
But I'll just say this, I know what you're asking, but it's, I always say this about research, that we are the lightning rod, so we present it to somebody and then we are the ones who get the brunt of it, right? Whether or not anybody else is behind us. But in a way, it's a healthy amount of paranoia too, because you have to make sure the data is accurate. It's a strength of this business. But actually, maybe I should never say anything like that. But I think with the politics, it all, you never know. It's hard to predict at any point. Your insights could really bring the change you need, or it could go sideways. But it's almost, gosh, this one's a tough one. But I'll just say this. I was watching Perry Mason yesterday, and one of the things that came up was everyone needs a good defense. And even if they're guilty, they need a defense, right? That's why they're given a defense lawyer. So I feel like in a way we are that person, because depending on the industry, you always try to find something that validates what you're thinking or feeling. The innovative and creative research or the strategic research is so few and far in between, because at any given point, people are using it to prop up their product or sell something or, push this type of media, whatever it is, right? So, but when the election season hits, you can ask my husband this, like I will be looking at it as this, the way they interpret this data, it's the same thing, the margin of error. And he's like, but then, the narrative's already out in the world, which means they achieved their goal. It's not, I feel like it's not up to us to decide whether it's good or bad, but it's just being able to accept the fact that sometimes the politics will just go against you, right?
Will be there.
But your role is to just be that truth teller and at the same time support what the company is trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. It is a very hard question, Naveena. Absolutely. And I don't know if anybody really has the answer, even if we kind of expand beyond kind of theatrical or kind of media and entertainment, right? If we just look at CPG or any other industries that you've in the past touched. What I want to do with that question, though, is highlight that it is there, that we as researchers should not deny that politics is honestly a KPI. Or KPI impacting factor, right? That we have to, at the very least, be aware of the dynamics within teams, the dynamics between different executives. If you're a silo, if you're kind of an island over there, right? I always say that. And if you're not even aware of kind of what are the pressures and what are the agendas around issues, right? Well, you're too myopic. I mean, you're just too almost irrelevant, right? And my fear with this is, with the politics conversation, is that if no one takes that fight, if you will, who loses the most is not which side of the political, kind of game, wins or loses ultimately with the product or the title, whatever the case might be. it's really the audience. It's really the people out there, right? That were silenced, but, because there's just too many layers of complex navigating that no one can do, honestly, right? So at the very least, I love that we have enough courage here to shine some light on that, as opposed to not even embrace it as part of reality that we may or may not ever be able to truly get rid of or affect in any way. Awesome. Naveena, I have a couple more questions and we'll wrap up here. It just, as you can tell, our conversation derailed into
it's like catching up. I just, it's 4:00. Should we get a glass of wine?
I know. You should have done that. I think my kind of last theme here is, we talked about so many intangibles here, right? That, again, sit on top of the tangibles, right? When it comes to research. But how do you, as a leader of a team, for example, as part of, a peer, in a broader team, how do you think about kind of ways to improve on these things? How do you think about how to measure these things before you can actually improve and grow? A lot of this comes down to kind of what goes into impact. And if we don't know what goes into it, how do we measure it? How do we even improve it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd say that, for me personally, it's understanding the process. In my example, is understanding the process of filmmaking. And if you come in and just, there's so many people who come in very young, who are super nerdy about movies, love classic movies, have these stories, right? There's even someone on my team in their 20s who talks they've been watching 50s movies all their lives. And I think that kind of love and interest in movies and the movie making process is something that will help us identify how we can insert ourselves in different parts of the process. And otherwise it just, it's the cool thing, cool new thing, AI, right. Something, predictive modeling, whatever it is, that's the new buzzword, right? We're in such a content-rich and narrative-rich environment that it's so easy to get fascinated by new things. But as long as we make sure research is grounded in what we really need and what's been working really well for many years, the technology could be different, but, the ultimate understanding of the process. And I think that applies to every industry, right? So understand and know where your competition is, right, where you sit, what ultimately is the goal, that for our perspective will give meaning to what you're doing too. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is, it's almost, this is the most difficult thing. And this is where I think AI might actually really help us, is understanding trends, because we have to be trend spotters. We have to be ahead of the culture. Otherwise, there are going to be things that come up that will end up making us wonder, why did this work? Because we are such an industry that is very, very reliant on outliers. We have formulas, right? So there's a formula for a rom-com. There's a formula for an action movie. We need, 10 big set pieces, or, there's the meet cute. So there's all these things that are used, but unless something is an outlier, it doesn't create the same buzz. But in a way, we have to understand that we have to leave room for that unpredictability as well, right? So being ahead of trends, not just now, because every time we develop something, it's 3, 4, 5 years ahead of when we actually release it, right? Some even longer. And in other industries, the process is even longer, right? Product development process. So it's 3 years from now, 5 years from now, are people still going to want this?
Yeah.
And then also, there's a space in there that we have to leave for saying we actually don't know.
No, I love that. What a great way to put a kind of the bow on this. I love that, because we're helpful, because we want to be action oriented and impactful, because we know a lot. There's a lot of data coming from lots of different places, but the unknown and the comfort with not knowing or not having all the answers all the time is, first of all, real. And again, like the other topic we just talked about, we should, as good, impactful leaders, we should also put that in our kind of vernacular also say that, we don't know this at this time. We can do lots of different things that might not help us get to the final answer or the only answer, but it's okay to say we don't know, and we can work to try to figure it out. I love this. Naveena, I end all our conversations with 3 questions. I would love to ask those of you as well. So the first one is, what is one small thing that you personally do to create impact in your work or in your life, or kind of more broadly speaking in the world?
Well, I mean, I won't say the world in general, but I will say my world. I love the team I have right now, and I couldn't do anything without them. And I make sure to always check in. And even if it's like a small, like, here, I got some coffee for you, or, like, how was your weekend? Like, just those little things, because acknowledging the humanity of the people around you, will help. I think when things go wrong or things go crazy, then you're actually dealing with a person. So I like to keep that front and center all the time.
Love it. Love it. Check in. Keep in mind that these are people. They're not just your direct reports or your peers. The same goes for senior level, folks kind of higher, above and beyond kind of your title and position as well. Awesome. And what would you recommend our audience members do, something little that you would encourage people to do on a daily basis or frequently to have positive impact in their lives, in their work, in their worlds?
I mean, I honestly, I love experiences. I just absolutely love good food and good wine. And, so I think that life is so short. Research and work will always be there. Your loved ones need you, so it's just about just enjoying what we have, which we can get so bogged down with, and that's a reminder for me, because this year it's been about that, because it's so easy to get into a rut, but just finding at least one thing a day to really enjoy, I think it really changes your perspective in life.
Personally, I love that, because I agree with you. Time goes by so fast, and we're so consumed with whatever it is, work or, mostly work, right? Yeah. And sometimes it's easy to forget what are the things that
I was just in New York for work, and I had one evening where my colleagues were flying in later or the next day. So I usually just get some food really quick or whatever. This time I said, no, I'm going to go to this one restaurant. I sat at the bar, I ordered some food, and the bartender said, how's it? And I said, this is my happy place. I have not seen anyone laugh so hard. I don't think he expected that, right? But it was my happy place. It was a restaurant I've been wanting to go to. I got a seat at the bar, and
love it.
I would have loved to have my husband, my friends around. It would have been fun, but that was my happy place.
I love it.
So it just
very delicious.
Started the week really well.
What was the restaurant? I mean, if you want to share.
It's called Gup Shop in New York. Yeah.
Okay. Next time I'm there, I have to check out.
Definitely.
Naveena, this has been very rich, generous, candid, reaffirming, but also stretching a little bit, for me at least. And I'm sure everyone who listens to this episode will agree. And I want to say thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your insights, your perspectives, for pushing back, and for truly answering a lot of these really kind of complex and shapeless questions at times, right? Because it's not that straightforward. So I really, really appreciate the time that you put in and the depth of your answers. Thank you so much, Naveena.
Thank you so much for having me. We don't get a chance to talk about what we do very often, so I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you and your perspective and your light and what you bring to this industry. So I'm very glad you're doing this and exploring issues and questions that we don't usually talk about. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Naveena.
As you heard in this episode of All About Impact, even the most complex industries like the business of creating movies, impact is crucial, albeit difficult to achieve. What is your formula for driving impact in your organization? Impact is the next frontier of research and insights, and it could be a lot easier with the right partner next to you. Reach out to me, Susan Petoyan, on LinkedIn, and let's together discover the impact champion in you. Tune in next week for another episode of All About Impact.